Coming right up, Public Affairs with Jeff Berkowitz. And our guest for tonight, Jim Oberweis, 14th Congressional District Republican primary candidate. The topics, you'll be seeing them coming right across the screen. We're going to be talking about earmarks, or should we have more or fewer earmarks? Immigration, more or less. Would that be good for the country, more or less? The war, has that been a plus for democracy or a minus? Money in politics, is that a blessing or an evil? All these topics are important, not just to the 14th Congressional District, but to you wherever you are, throughout the nation, whatever congressional district you're in, or whether you're not even thinking of a congressional district. These are national topics. These and many more coming right up in 40 seconds. You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Jim Oberweis, who is a candidate in the 14th Congressional District Republican primary. It's a tough primary. There are at least two other candidates, State Senator Chris Lawson, Kevin Burns, the mayor from Geneva. There are three candidates in the Democratic primary. This is a big national race, so even if you're not in the 14th Congressional District, don't turn that dial, because the issues we're going to be talking about are very much common to congressional districts throughout the state, indeed throughout the country. Jim Oberweis, our guest, grew up in Aurora or Sugar Grove. He didn't change. The house has been there for 30 years, but the district changed how they refer to it. He's a lifelong resident of the 14th Congressional District. That would
Correct,
be
sure.
University of Illinois undergrad, University of Chicago MBA, and he bought the Oberweis Dairy, or is interested in the Oberweis Dairy, from his brother. He is still a part owner, indeed still chairman of that, although more of his time is probably spent with Oberweis Asset Management, Oberweis Securities.
Actually, not anymore. My
Now
son is running that, and now my time is spent on the campaign.
Right, but when he was doing it, when he was a businessman, for which he was probably for the bulk of, 35 years? Until
Correct.
he really started focusing on politics. The Oberweis Octagon, you can go on the website and read about that, not to be confused with the military Pentagon. And in building up that business, asset management, he and others built it up, lost it all. And as they say, if it doesn't kill you, it builds character, something like that. Because he came right back again and built it up, and it's now, what is it, a $3 billion?
We're managing a little over $3 billion in Oberweis Asset Management. That's correct. About $1.5 billion of that is in our own Oberweis funds.
So he has done well. Some would estimate his net worth at over $50 million. We may talk about that. In 2001, Jim Oberweis got the bug in terms of electoral politics. I think that would be fair to say. He has run twice in the Republican primary for U.S. Senate in 2002 and 2004, and he has run once for governor in 2006 from the Republican primary. In each of those races, he did well. He came in second. He would have preferred first. Now he's running in the 14th Congressional District and Republican primary. Now he would like to be and expects to be, I imagine, first. Is that right?
Things look very good. We're very pleased with the way things are going.
Jim Oberweis.
And by the way, I have won the 14th Congressional District each and every time that I've run.
When you were running in those other races?
Yes.
Okay, so you got some friends there, lives in Sugar Grove with his wife, or we could say lives in Aurora, however you want to say, with his current wife, Julie. He has 5 children from a prior marriage. His wife, Julie, has 2, so they have a total of 7, 14 grandchildren. So it's
Correct.
quite a Christmas picture, or happy holidays, whatever we say, picture that you send out. Can you fit them all in one shot?
Christmas card is fine. Christmas picture is fine.
14th Congressional District, we'll talk more about that as we get perhaps into the show, but it straddles the Metro Chicago downstate area. It's about 30 miles due west of Chicago, at least as to its border, and it has 8 counties. Kane County, DuPage, DuPage, part of DuPage.
A little bit of DuPage, the western side. Yep.
Southern Kendall County, of course, King County has a lot of the population. Kendall County, one of the fastest growing counties in Illinois. DeKalb County, out with the cornfields, would that be accurate to say? Lee County, Ronald Reagan's boyhood home in Dixon.
Yes. Yep.
And then to the west, the farmlands, Whiteside, Bureau, Henry counties, a bunch of other areas. Talk more about it, but it's, and of course, it is the 14th Congressional District has had as its congressman for the last 21 years, former Speaker J. Dennis Hastert, so that's a big deal. We're taping this on November 18th, only a few days ago. Speaker Hastert, who said he wouldn't run again, has now said he'll resign. Most likely it'll be prior to the end of the year. He has not given a date. Maybe you'll know that's when you watch it in the suburbs the week of November 26th, or in Aurora and Chicago on December 3rd. let's go right to the lightning round. We're going to hit some issues very quickly. We're going to come back and do more in depth. But Jim Oberweis, just tell me on these, do you want more or less earmarks? More or
Less, definitely.
less earmarks,
You
fewer
bet.
earmarks, okay. Prairie Parkway, is that an earmark?
Well, Prairie Park, look, some questions you can't have a one answer or one.
Well, you can use a
10
few words.
seconds
We'll give you a
on it.
little bit, maybe 15.
Prairie Parkway is something that needs to be done to control some of the congestion. It's much cheaper to do it now than it would be to do it 10 or 20 years from now.
Okay, and that's something you support?
Yes.
Senator Lowson, one of your opponents, does not?
I think he is not supporting it. I think he just hasn't looked at the future of the country.
But it is an earmark, and you're saying that that's an earmark, that's okay.
Well, when you say earmark, you need to define what you mean by that, because clearly this is a program that makes sense. Are you going to say that all road construction is an earmark? I mean, it can be done in different
Quite
ways.
a bit is, probably, but we'll let others and the voters and the viewers decide.
However you want to call it, it's the right thing to do to save taxpayer dollars for the future.
Bringing home the bacon, should we have more of that or less of that?
I've told voters in my district, if you're looking for somebody who's going to bring home pork, I'm the wrong guy. I will vote for what I think is the right thing for my district, the right thing for my state, and the right thing for my country. And I will work hard to make sure that all representatives in Congress do the same.
Federal involvement in transportation issues, more or less?
I think we've got about the right level of federal involvement in transportation issues.
Feds paying for the roads. There's a lot of funds that comes from the feds in matching grants. Some would criticize it, say that everybody says they want the roads because sometimes, I guess, the majority of the funds come from the feds, so they say, why not?
Jeff, we have local roads.
So the quick question, more feds paying for roads or less?
Well, wait a
feds
minute. We have local roads that are done by local authorities. We have state roads that are done by state authorities and primarily state money. Then we have things like federal interstate highways that are logically done, at least in large part, by the federal government.
Okay. Individual control of Social Security funds. That is, people put money into Social Security right now, they can't say how it's invested, they get about a 1.3% return. Should they be able to invest it in stocks and bonds if they want? Should we have more of that or less of that?
The Social Security system is drastically underfunded. We will make changes in that system over the next 10 years, and there are only a certain limited number of ways. We either have to tax more, provide less benefits, or provide a greater return on investors. Many people believe that the easy answer is offer alternatives that could provide a greater return. That's not the only possible answer.
What's your answer?
I think that's a reasonable approach.
That's something you would pursue?
I think that's one of the possible answers, yes.
Well, I mean, yes or no? Would you like to see more individual control of how people invest their Social Security funds?
Yes, but I worry that people look at that as the only answer or the panacea. And from spending a life in the investment business, I understand the risks on that side as well.
We'll come back. More federal involvement in financing healthcare?
Again, that's not a one answer or one issue.
More or less. Just which way do you want to go?
Less.
More federal involvement in insuring health care for individuals?
Generally speaking, I'm going to be looking at less federal government involvement and more freedom for individuals.
More or less free trade?
More.
More. Would you have supported NAFTA if you were there in '94?
Yes.
And CAFTA a few years ago?
Yes.
And you would have no regrets about that?
No. Look, trade is going to occur no matter what we do. Free trade is generally good for both sides. And remember, trade means both sides are agreeing to this particular transaction. Generally speaking, everybody benefits in the long run. But there are some problems created, and that's where the government can come in terms of helping retrain people who need that opportunity.
More or fewer legal immigrants?
I have no particular problem with the level that we're at right now. The level today is much higher than it has been in the past, but I don't have any problem with that as long as it's legal, as long as we're following laws. I've said many times, I think we ought to have a national debate on that issue, determine what the correct level is that we're willing to accept and how we're willing to accept them, and then follow the law. It's people breaking the law.
For both legal and illegal?
No,
there should be zero, there should be zero illegal
immigrants? There should be
immigrants?
zero illegal, absolutely.
Okay. But as far as legal immigrants, perhaps we should have more, you're saying, perhaps fewer. That's what we should have the national debate on.
Yeah, I will
Is
say
that your
again,
words?
no, that's not my words. My
Okay.
words are we should have a national debate on that issue, determine what we'd like as our country, and then enforce that law.
Okay. Guest workers, should we have more or fewer guest workers?
We actually, under our current laws, have no limits on the number of guest workers. However, people are not following our laws today because many times companies have an opportunity to hire and take advantage of illegal immigrants at a very low wage rate. I think that's wrong. That's one of the things I'm fighting. If they follow our laws and they use the guest worker visas. And by the way, we're proposing, well, I assume we'll get into this later, but we're proposing a tamper-proof ID card to be issued along with those visas. We have no problem with guest workers as long as they're following our laws. And by that, they must be paid a reasonable wage.
Well, we'll come back to this perhaps more length, but let's stick with it a moment on immigration while we're here. We should say if you go to jimoberweis.com, which is Jim Oberweis' website, you'll find a very detailed proposal on securing
Correct.
America, as you put it, dealing
Correct.
with illegal immigration.
Correct.
And that just came out in the last few days. And
That's
it's now on
correct.
your website, so people can read more about it. But one of the things you just mentioned, the tamper-proof ID card,
Mm-hmm.
what I don't quite understand about this is not everybody's going to have one of these. Who has these cards?
This would be issued with a visa, whether it's a student visa or a worker visa. And the advantage of it is then we would require companies who are hiring non-American citizens to verify with this tamper-proof card. And it would be read by a small little reader, very much like a credit card reader, so that the company would then know that this person is legitimate, they are legal, and that their visa has not expired.
But what some people raise, Chris Matthews, for instance, national media guy, somebody who interviews a lot of folks like you, he's troubled by it because he says if not everybody's going to have it, is it profiling? That is, do you look at some people and say, you look like you might be an immigrant, so you should have it, or you look like you should have a visa?
No.
Other people,
no,
they don't. How do we do this?
That's
if not
completely
everybody?
wrong, Jeff. You want to come to work for Oberweis Dairy, we're going to ask you either, if you're an American citizen, to give us your Social Security number. If you give us your Social Security number, we can verify using the E-Verify system, except in Illinois where this crazy governor is trying to prevent us from doing that. We verify that you are, in fact, Jeff Berkowitz, and that does match your Social Security number. American citizen, fine, no problem. However, you don't have a Social Security number. You're not an American citizen. You have a visa. We can then check that visa to make a check with the ID card to make sure that the visa is still valid.
And you're saying that shouldn't be offensive to anybody, that when you go to apply as an employee, you should be willing to say, are you an American citizen or are you not?
Absolutely. Do you have a Social Security number? Or don't you have a Social Security number? You have to do that now. I mean, this is standard procedure. I'm not proposing any big changes. And by the way, under our laws, we can have an unlimited number of guest workers, and they can, under it's H-2A program, they can come in for 10 months, and then at the end of the 10 months, they must return home for 2 months. And they can do that over and over and over and over again. Or in the alternative, they can come in for 3 years, and then they have to go home for 6 months, and then they can come back again. This is the current law. This is no change.
Okay, and just the last thing on immigration, you don't want to round everybody up. If there are 12 million illegal immigrants here, your idea is have a set of controls on employer sanctions for hiring people who are illegal, have other
Absolutely.
controls for false IDs and so forth. And your point is eventually what these 10, 12 million illegal immigrants will voluntarily leave because there's no job?
That's right. The problem will take care of itself. It will go away over a period of time. And secondly, equally important, we must stop people crossing our borders illegally.
And you've said recently this is the number one issue as you talk to people in your district and you ask them what the issues are that they think is important. You're telling me it's illegal immigration that comes up?
Well, let me say again what I said, Jeff. I have been going around to precincts throughout this district. I've been knocking on doors in every county throughout the 14th district. I expected the number one question that I would get would be on Iraq. In fact, of course, 90% of the people are just, don't want to talk about any issues. They're glad to see you and go on. But those 5 or 10% of people who do want to talk about issues, we have had more questions about illegal immigration than all other issues combined, including Iraq.
All right, so we touched on immigration. We'll come back to the war. When you come to this district, the 14th Congressional District, we're told cultural issues are very important. Gays, guns, God, abortion. Is that right?
I think those are important issues, sure.
Especially in the 14th Congressional District more than others, do you think?
No, and I've been a statewide candidate. I've traveled all over the state. I think those issues are just as important in Sangamon County as they are in the 14th Congressional District.
Just as important in the Republican primary and the Democratic primary, or are they?
Well, they're perhaps more important in the Republican primary.
They are. Okay, well, let me take something, and I know it goes back to the past, so we're not going to spend a long time on it, but there are people who say, well, a lot of this race, some would say, is between Chris Lawson and you, because you are the two conservatives. There's Kevin Burns. He's been a guest of this show. We like him, like all our guests who are here.
He's a great guy.
He's a moderate, or at least he has that image, and there are people who say there aren't enough moderate votes in the 14th, at least in a Republican primary, to elect somebody. So just hypothetically, if it comes down to you...
First of all, I think that's an erroneous assumption. Kevin Burns is a good guy, but the fact of the matter is, for whatever reason, he's not challenging the leaders in this particular race.
You had a
like 3,
poll,
4,
and
5%.
Lawson has a poll, and they're
Right.
pretty similar, showing that you and Lawson are neck and neck, basically.
Well, our poll shows me about
Yeah,
4
but
points.
statistically,
Yeah,
perhaps
close,
not.
reasonably close.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
right.
All right. So if it comes down to that, and people are looking at that, and they're looking at the abortion issue, you know, Chris Lawson would say he's 100% or 1,000% pro-life, right?
Sure, and so am I.
And he would only allow an exception to allow an abortion if the life of the mother were at issue. Senator Lawson wouldn't allow an exception for rape or incest or health. He said that on this show. Is your position the same?
Yes.
Okay. So he would say, I think, he would say he's held that position for a long time. He's been in the Senate 15 years. He's been voting that. He said, you don't have a record in terms of votes. What do you say to that?
I say that people today are sick and tired of people who've been a part of this political process. The Ryan Blagojevich Springfield culture has unfortunately, I think, been accepted by people who served in the Illinois House for 10, 15, 20 years, and they become a part of the system. They no longer are able to differentiate sometimes between right and wrong. I believe that voters today are looking for somebody to come in from the outside with a clean record and somebody who's doing it to serve instead of somebody who's doing it for a job. For me, Jeff, this is not a job. This will cost me a lot more money than I'll ever be paid.
Are you saying Senator Lawson's doing it for a job? Because he's been there 15 years.
Well, I think clearly he is doing it for a job. It's his career, if you want to call it that.
And so you're saying
And by the way, that is the opposite of what our founding fathers believed to be the case.
they
Our
want
founding-
citizen politicians.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. This is an issue that would come up, and I'm sure will in the campaign, because you remember this from 2001 when you were asked about abortion at that time, and you were running, just starting the campaign, early in the campaign.
Be careful,
early
be
in the campaign.
accurate now, because
Let me ask you if I am,
something-
and then
okay.
you tell me if I'm accurate. As I heard the question, the questioner said, and this is in November of 2001, are you a moderate Republican, are you pro-choice or anti-choice? And this is what I've heard the answer to be, and I've transcribed it.
That is absolutely, you're already totally wrong.
Well, let me just read it, because I listened to this, unless somebody's fraudulently prepared a tape.
Sure.
There it goes. That's obviously the tough question. This is Jim Oberweis answering in 2001. The honest answer is that I've been a lifelong Catholic.
Correct.
Still am.
Right.
Obviously, I have concerns about that particular issue. However, I think that right now we're getting a very, very strong symbol. This again is in November of 2001. A very, very strong symbol in the Taliban of what can happen if we try to impose our religious beliefs on others.
That's correct.
Okay, so you said that. So I really think that that issue is a choice that government should stay out of and let people make that choice the way they see fit with their own conscience and their own moral beliefs.
Correct. The only thing that you left out was the first part of that, where I said that I believe in the sanctity of life and that I'm a right-to-life person.
For yourself, but
Yes.
at that time you were not willing to impose your views about pro-life in terms of what you just said.
Exactly correct.
But now you've changed your position, is that right?
Exactly correct. And let me
Now
explain.
you're willing to impose your views.
Yes.
And you're using your lingo.
Yes, and the background of that is I was coming newly into the political scene, and quite frankly, I've always viewed myself as a Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan kind of conservative. And that particular issue, when I was involved in politics, was not a major issue. When we started to look at that, one could certainly argue that the conservative principle would be less government involvement, keep government out of it, let individuals make the decision.
Libertarian approach.
Well, I'm describing
Okay,
it the
go
way
ahead.
that I feel is correct,
Yes,
without using those types of labels.
Okay.
What I came to believe subsequent to that, after some in-length discussions, particularly with Jim Leahy and some others, is that if people know my position on this issue, and nobody did at that time, but if people know my position on this issue and they elect me with that position, then in fact I do have a right to vote those beliefs.
Okay, so if they know you,
And know my position
know
on
your
that issue,
position.
and elect me, then I do have a right, and
Okay.
perhaps even an obligation to vote those
and that's
beliefs.
the point. And so you're saying anybody voting for you now knows your position, knows how you're
Correct.
going to vote, know the direction you would if you could take the country to be completely 100% pro-life, as we've just discussed.
Correct.
Okay. Let's go over. We'll come back maybe to some other social issues, but I want to get over to war because that is a major issue you anticipated. So let's
You
talk
bet.
about
You bet.
more or less again, just quick answers. Defense, more or less defense in the global war on terrorism.
I think we're doing an extremely good job. I think we're at about the right level.
More or less offense in the global war on terrorism.
I'm very happy with what our current status in that position is.
So right balance.
I think we're
offense.
about right balance, yes.
Is it important to have offense? As you've probably heard Rudy Giuliani talk about, saying that was the mistake pre-September 2001, pre-September 11th. He said we were only playing defense. Now we're playing
I
offense.
think we're doing a lot more.
You agree with Rudy on that?
Yes.
Okay. Aggressive interrogations of detainees at Guantanamo. Should we have more or fewer of those aggressive interrogations?
Jeff, if we're at war, we have an obligation to the people of America to do everything we can to try to prevent another disaster. And I believe that there are people out there in Al-Qaeda who are today, as we sit here, plotting and scheming, trying to figure out how to inflict great damage on our country. If we have somebody who is a part of Al-Qaeda, I think we ought to do whatever we can to prevent that.
Whatever we can? Should we do torture?
You know what? I'm going to let that up to our military and to the people involved in that. But there are certainly instances under which we can aggressively pursue information from those people.
Should we do waterboarding, at least with selective detainees? Because as you know, waterboarding is described, you just put this person on a board like a teeter-totter, he leans back, put something over his face, pour the water. Some says it is drowning, others say it gives you the sensation of drowning. Waterboarding, more or less.
I think there are, I don't know how much we're doing right now, so more or less is a difficult question, but I believe there are instances under which that may be legitimate.
Okay. Warrantless wiretaps of suspected terrorists, more or less.
More.
If it's foreign to foreign, do you think it requires a warrant or not?
No.
If it's foreign to domestic?
It never has if it's foreign to foreign.
Foreign to domestic, suspected foreign terrorists dialing in or communicating with a U.S. citizen.
If you've got somebody from Al-Qaeda calling somebody in the United States, I believe the government should have the right, without a warrant, to listen to that information. However, our administration has taken the other approach now and said that they will not do that without a warrant, so it's not even an issue anymore.
Domestic? Should there be a warrant?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now we'll go a little more deliberative here, but it's not too much more deliberative. We only have about 10 minutes left. But on Iraq, you would say you favored the surge earlier this year in 2007?
Well, I think we have to be very cautious on that. The surge clearly seems to be having positive effects. I think it seems to be working, but I think there are still great risks. Obviously, the number of people dying each month, both the Americans and Iraqis, has decreased slightly. So it appears that it's working, but there are other factors going on. The Sunni Iraqis have decided that perhaps it's better to work with the Americans, and that may be just as important as the surge itself. So things are going well. If they don't continue to go well, my guess is we're going to see some type of partition going on in Iraq.
But did you support the surge then, and do you still support it?
I was cautious towards the surge then, and I have not changed today. General Petraeus has said that we will be withdrawing troops over the next 6 months, so it's going to become not an issue.
In terms of managing the war, there's the McCain view, there should have been more troops, should have been managed very differently. He supported the war, but critical of Bush and Rumsfeld. And then there's the Bush view. Which one are you closer to in terms of managing the war?
I would say I'm probably closer to McCain. I think it's in this particular issue, not on some other issues.
But on that issue, you're saying those criticisms were warranted.
Yes, it seems very clear that we did an incredibly good job militarily. We probably won the war in a shorter period of time and with less loss of life than we anticipated. But the handling of the situation after that has been very poorly handled.
If you had been in Congress in the fall of 2002 when the vote came up asking for authorization to authorize the president to take military action in Iraq, which he did, of course, in spring of 2003, would you have voted in fall of 2002 to give the president that authorization?
Absolutely.
Okay. And looking back now that we've spent about $500 billion there, we're spending just currently about $120 billion. We're approaching, if we haven't exceeded, 4,000 lives, American soldiers lost, tens of thousands of injuries to American soldiers, a substantial number of Iraqi citizens. I don't know the number who have been killed as a part of this, or at least who died, however you want to put it. Was it worth it? Within hindsight.
Yeah, it's been an incredible price to pay. There's no question about that. On the other hand, there are people out there, the stakes are high. There are people out there trying to kill Americans, trying to end our way of life, trying to end our society. And the question, I think, really is, do we want to fight the war in Iraq, or do we want to fight it here on our own soil? I believe we have been incredibly successful in preventing a future disaster. That can change at any minute. I believe that there are people out there.
On that, in hindsight, you're saying it was a good idea to go into Iraq? If you had to say good or bad, which way do you go?
I would say good.
Okay.
It was the right decision at the time based on the information we had at the time.
And now, with the information you have, you still think it was worth the cost, substantial, as I've outlined?
Well, I don't even think that's the critical issue here. The critical issue is how do we begin to remove ourselves from that situation, bring those costs down, both in terms of human life and in terms of dollars spent.
You mean looking forward?
Absolutely.
And how do we?
Well, I believe that we're going to begin withdrawing the troops, as General Petraeus has said, and that's going to be happening in the next several months. However, I think it's also likely that we're going to have troops, some limited number of troops there for a very long period of time. We still have troops in Europe.
And you can support that?
I think there is no choice. Absolutely, okay. I support that. We have troops in South Korea. We have troops in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
All right, very quickly on immigration. We've
NATO
covered that, but
anyway.
So very quickly, of course you want to focus on border control before any kind of comprehensive immigration reform. Essentially, you say you don't favor an earned path to citizenship, even after you have border control. Is that correct?
Well, Jeff,
for those 12 million who are here illegally, you don't.
Amnesty will just tend to produce more people breaking our laws. We don't want more people breaking our laws, so I don't support a program that provides basic amnesty.
You do favor a fence across the southern border?
I did not. I believe that a main force should be focusing on finding companies that hire illegals. However, I recently visited Sassabee, Arizona, which is a town about 60 miles southwest of Tucson, and I talked to our border control and our customs agent at that time, and they literally showed me the border. There's no protection. You have a building that's...
So you'd favor a fence?
Let me finish here, because you have a building that's less than 100 yards long. People can walk around that. The only thing protecting the border beyond that was a single strand barbed wire, which was there to keep the American animals,
so
cows.
So you favor something, you're not sure whether it has to be the fence that's proposed. Am I getting that right?
No, I do favor the fence.
You do favor the fence,
yes.
Okay. Look, quickly on taxes, make all the Bush tax cuts permanent.
Absolutely.
You supported them then,
it's
support them now?
Absolutely. It's the right thing. It will help encourage entrepreneurs like myself to risk their capital, to invest their time and energy to help create jobs and opportunities.
Don't raise the capital gains tax as some have proposed. Don't raise the dividend tax. You agree with that?
I believe we're in a good spot right now with our tax situation. We should make it permanent.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Jim Oberweis, who is running in the 14th Congressional District Republican primary. Thank you so much for coming, Jim.
Jeff,
hope you're coming back.
It was a pleasure.
All right, we'll see. We'll see if we can get you back with some of your opponents. Internet tax, Senator Lawson sat here and said he doesn't want to tax access to the internet, but he wants it to be an equal playing field for people who buy products, buy the internet, buy phone, buy the internet.
Tax is bad. My opponent may want more taxes. I want less taxes.
So you oppose what he says about making it an equal playing field.
I believe he's wrong on that issue.
All right. There's some issues that are peculiar to your district and to your race. You've criticized Senator Lawson for bringing on his staff, Denny Wiggins, the chair of the Kane County Republican Party, right?
Yes, Denny first came to us and wanted a job after he explained to us why he thought Mr. Lawson was a bad candidate, shouldn't be elected, and the things that he had done wrong. He asked to be paid. We said, no, we're not going to do that. We'd love your endorsement. We asked him to come to sit down with us looking for the endorsement. We said, no, we're not going to pay.
He says now the same thing's happening with the vice chair of the Aurora Township Republican Party. I think it's Henry Travitz. Do you know that man? And is he now on your staff?
It has been all along.
But however, is that the same thing?
Absolutely not.
It's not hypocritical?
No, Henry doesn't control anything. He doesn't control the party in Kane County. He's a volunteer.
What about a number of people you have? Lawson says you got at least probably 12 people. You're trying to buy the race. You got so many people working for you. What do you say to Ms. Lawson on that?
I say that we have a staff of very, very good people. He has hired 4 or 5 people. Perhaps he hasn't hired as many, but we have invested our time in making sure we have a good staff to serve the people of the district.
How much money will you put into this race?
We've indicated that we're willing to commit up to $2.5 million.
What's your net worth?
It depends on how you value Oberweis Asset Management,
50
how
million?
you value Oberweis Dairy. It depends entirely on how you value his assets.
Can you empathize? People say, can you empathize with people who are worried about paying their college tuition, paying the next bill?
Jeff, I believe I can because